All right, so let's start with on a light note, sort of, a fun question, killing characters. I mean, you obviously dealt with it this past season. So tell us a little bit about the thinking behind it, when you say, okay, yes, we're gonna go for it, and specifically how you plot that out in advance.
I knew it would always happen. I knew, I'm assuming you're talking about Jimmy Darmody. Yeah. I knew that he would die eventually, and I knew he would die at Nucky's hand. When that would happen, I wasn't really sure. Early on in the plotting out of season 2, it started to become clear to me that if we were gonna tell this story honestly, it was gonna happen at the end of the year, and there was really no way out of it being Jimmy. Obviously, so early on in the series, and he's such a huge character, and we loved Michael, and it's the hardest decision I've ever had to make as a writer. And we did spend a great deal of time waffling and trying to say, okay, well, what if this happened? What if some alternative? And everything else, everything that wasn't that felt like a television show to me. And we just kept going back to that place. So I probably made the decision somewhere around the 2nd or 3rd episode of season 2 that was the way it was going to happen. And then the secret was, how do we keep this from getting out? But it came pretty clear to Michael as the scripts were being produced that he would come into my office and go, why am I really kind of, looks like I'm heading down a bad path here. And he was sort of dancing around it. And I really didn't, as much as I think he knew, he wanted to know, I didn't think it was a good idea for, to tell any actor what's going to happen in advance. And at one point he came into my office and, he's sort of like on a fishing expedition, and he said, have you thought about killing Eli, Nucky's brother? And I said, yeah, I've thought about that. And he said, okay. And he said, well, have you thought about killing me? And I said, yeah, I'm thinking about it right now, actually. And I said, but he goes, well, this is really difficult. It's really hard to do this and not be certain. I said, well, if I were an actor, I would use that. I say, because Jimmy's very uncertain about what's happening, and so it was really hard. I mean, and then as it got closer to the end, I mean, then of course, we had to have that conversation. But what
was that conversation like?
Well, it sort of never happened. Michael was away. He was in upstate New York. I was in Manhattan. Martin Scorsese was going to be on the call, as was Tim Van Patten, who's another executive producer. So we scheduled a conference call for an afternoon on a Saturday, and it was supposed to be 5 p.m. So it's really difficult to get Marty on the phone for things because he was in the middle of editing, and we finally got the call, and it took a long time to arrange it. 5 o'clock came. Tim, Marty, and I were waiting for Michael. Finally, at 10 minutes after 5, Michael got a line. He said, I'm sorry, I'm on upstate. I have a hard time getting a good line. So we started to make small talks, and Marty said, oh, well, just, I'm in the middle of editing my movie, et cetera, and then we boop, and Michael was gone. It's like, okay, so we wait another 10 minutes, and Marty's really busy, and he's got to leave, and we're saying, well, we got to stay, we got to have this conversation. And he's like, Michael's texting me, and finally 20 after 5, Michael gets on the line again. I said, Michael, look, I'm gonna talk really quickly because I know you have a bad line. We have talked about this before, but the reason for the call is boop, and he was gone again. I was like, Marty's like, what? Let me just email him. I said, you can't email him. I gotta, we have to have this conversation, and we couldn't get him back on the phone. So ultimately, I felt horrible, but I had to send him an email and say, I don't want you to get the script and read this, but you sort of knew where this was going, et cetera, et cetera. So after that, we had a conversation. He was totally fine with it. He said, look, obviously I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to stay on the show, and I love doing this, but as a storyteller, this is the best way we could do it. And so it was tough, but anyway.
That's a mature,
long answer to your short.
Right, that's a mature reaction. Have you guys experienced other reactions to telling characters?
Well, I'm 24. I mean, Homeland's still new enough where we actually have a pretty low body count, but 24 is littered. There's a graveyard of dozens of characters, and I was talked out of a couple of deaths, believe it or not.
By the actors?
By the actors.
Wow. That's some fancy lawyer.
And so it really was. But more often than not, it was taking them out on the walk.
What's that walk like? How do you do the walk?
We need to talk. But and honestly, sometimes it would take people by surprise. I guess what was always stunning to me is that actors don't always know when their own. Some actually really have a great sense that their stories come to an end or been told, and others are totally not.
Right.
And it's fun in the margins when actually we didn't do it. I didn't save characters' lives because they necessarily they were convincing, because they came and actually pitched maybe I kill him. And it was actually a better idea.
Wow.
But
how about the rest of you guys?
Killing characters is never fun. And you end up having these really difficult conversations. I remember having, for Private Practice, had the conversation with Chris Lowell, trying to get in touch with him, same thing. He was on a mountain in Africa. And like I kept trying to get in touch with him, and finally we had the conversation, and it was great. He was like, well, I'm in the most beautiful place in the world to hear that my character is going to go. And then he finally said, can you just kill me in the worst way possible? Can it be really painful for the audience?
Right.
And I was like, that I can do.
Right.
So it was good.
Joe Pantoliano made that same request on Sopranos. He said he lobbied to stay alive. He said, I love being on the show, but if you have to kill me, I understand. Just please take me out with a bang. We said, done.
And he got his head
He got his head chopped off. Yeah. So,
That was an amazing sequence.
Yeah,
we were paying homage to that last season. We had a big fight between our two main characters, and we were watching that. See, that fight was brutal. That was
directed by Tim Van Patten, who just he can do a fight scene
with the bug spray in the eyes.
They really
very impressive.
That was a fun day.
Glenn,
for
how about
me.
you with John Bernthal's character this year? That was probably the biggest shock, I think, even though people are killed in every episode.
Well, yeah, we did have a high body count in the back. You know, we had some major deaths. We had John Bernthal's character and Jeff DeMunn's, which was the big shock because, you know, we're based on Robert Kirkman's graphic novel. And so people saw that Shane death coming, and Bernthal knew that that was coming. And we scripted to that, but I felt it was sort of anticlimactic because everybody who had read the book knew that was coming. So when I became showrunner, I had already talked to the other writers about killing off Jeff DeMunn's character because I thought nobody would see that, and the idea that we're killing two main characters back to back, that was something that was kind of a risk. So and on our show, what I like to do is when we kill a character, it has to generate more story. Like instead of just being the ending, it's how does it affect all of the other characters and how can they act crazy and do screwed up things and you know, how can we follow new storylines coming out of that? So Jeff's death, you know, got us that, Dale's death. And when I called him, he was just like, great, just make it good. You know, he really wanted to do that. John Bernthal, you know, he did not want to go, and he kept calling, well, how about this, how about that, you know, and we used some of that. I have an open door policy, and we took it very seriously when you use parts of it, but ultimately I needed that to be about our main character, you know, and a lot of his pitches were skewing it to his character, and I had to kind of, you know, stick the landing there for the main character. So it was, those conversations are never easy. I've had other people on the show who think it's punitive when they're killed off, and it's, well, you signed up for a zombie show. That's what we do.
Yeah, most of the cast is already dead. So
yeah, that's what we do, right?
One question just on the subject of communicating to actors. Vina, you're now done shooting the second season of The Killing.
Yes.
What was without revealing the name, what was the conversation like with the character who ended up being Rosie Larson's killer?
Oh, really, really intense and very surprising. And the character did not expect it. Yeah, I mean, just absolutely, they were shocked. Yeah. I know, I'm trying not to.
And I'm trying to think if this is going to run.
As vague as possible.
This actually may run after it's been revealed, but I don't know when it's revealed, so.
Right.
Did you always know it was that character?
We did, yes.
From the pilot, you knew?
Yes.
Was this character
And I'm trying to watch it.
shocked in a good way? He or she?
Was
the person who found out this information shocked in a good way? Like, wow, I'm happy
I think
about
so.
it? Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Next panelist.
Vince, you had a very notable death in the finale.
Oh yeah.
Very colorful, very gory, and I think Giancarlo's character Gus, we sort of knew he wasn't a main character. We kind of had a sense that he was going to be going at some point. When you were crafting his narrative, did you kind of know when you were going to end that for him? Because it was a cat and mouse sort of for that whole season.
It was. We sort of saw the whole season as a 13-episode chess game between Giancarlo's character and Bryan Cranston's character, and a lot like what Terrence was just saying. We went through the 12 steps of grief, or whatever you want to call them. The writers and I all season long saying, you know, do we have to kill him off? Does he have to go? Does he have to? Is there some other way around this? Because he's a wonderful human being, great guy, great actor, and the character. People love this character. but you know, I take all my cues from Highlander, the movie. There, you know, there can be only one at the end. So, so we and I had that conversation. I have a little office in Albuquerque when I'm there, and I brought him into my little office there, and I said, had the conversation, and this was maybe about, when was this? Maybe 3 weeks, a month out, and I said, you got to keep this on the down low. And then I was so nervous telling him this, and he took it much better than I was. I was just kind of flustered and flop sweat going, but he's a very charming guy.
Did he also want to go out with a real dramatic bang?
I sort of preemptively said, you're going to go out with a bang, and he said, well, great, okay, all right. So
literally.
Yeah.
How hard is it for all of you to keep this, sort of talking about keeping it secret? Because those with social media, with the constant sort of, is this going to happen, and all the speculation, how hard has it been to keep those kind of secrets, especially being at you? Your whole show centers on one act, which happened before the show even started.
Right.
So how hard has it been for you, for example, to keep these things secret?
I mean, it's been, we just shot the finale, so there was a lot of secrecy around that. And, you know, for basically for 2 years, you know, we've had a room full of people, you know, who know the answer. So thank God they're incredibly trustworthy.
Incredible with Twitter, and I mean, just to even imagine that a secret can be kept.
There are people out there who are dedicated to finding out information and putting it on the internet. I mean, people started analyzing our casting notices and trying to figure out what role you're getting. So you know, now it's done. It's amazing the lengths. So we'll change names in casting. We'll never call people. It's just still.
They'll report something that's going to happen on Grey's Anatomy. They'll be like, this is what's going on. And it's completely fake because we have an assistant who spends all of her time writing fake sides.
That's a great idea. Actually, we should swap sides, and you should have suddenly they're in 1923 on Grey's Anatomy. But they're driving a Model T. That makes no sense. Yeah, it's really, you have to work to stay ahead, and it still doesn't.
Yeah, we don't have sides on our show. We start shooting Monday, and everybody just has to have it on their iPad, and we're getting rid of sides, and
so
we have somebody
paper trail essentially.
Exactly, but we have to write you know, phony audition scenes. So you know, and it's a thing. There are people out there who just want to spoil the show, right? I mean, you had a thing on with Gus's death, right? And that,
I heard that after the fact. They told me, because they didn't tell me until after, because I knew I have a weak heart. But there was some freeze frame, some frame grab from some post-production house of his face.
Yeah, we've had similar issues, and it's impossible to trace.
And you live in fear of it. And we shoot at Q Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and across the lot from us, they were shooting the Avengers. And I didn't know any of the folks over there, but I heard through the grapevine that their entire script got out at a certain point on the internet, and they had to rewrite the ending and all that. Just you hear that, and you're like, those poor bastards. Jesus.
But you know that as soon as you finish your rap, they're going to see it in China tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
They know the whole country knew about Giancarlo before.
Now, one thing, Vince, you have an end date for your show.
Yes.
So do you know how it ends?
I have, with every day, we have a little bit clearer picture of how it ends. We have, we're getting there. I would like to know more about how it ends, frankly. I would feel more comfortable.
Just go on the internet.
How about the rest of you? Do you know how your shows end?
No. I did. I mean, I knew how Grey's Anatomy ended if we had ended in season 2. I know Grey's Anatomy ended if we had ended in season 4. But now we're in season 8, heading into season 9. I have no idea. So I don't know. I have no plans. I've learned to let that go.
I don't. I have an idea of what I would like the show to mean at the end of its run, but how you dramatize that, I haven't figured out.
And will you stick with the graphic novel, or will you diverge and have some sort
We've already diverged. We're our own entity, you know, our like a parallel universe to that show. So we've already, you know, introduced characters, kept characters alive. It's so far different, but I think ultimately the tone, the spirit of it is the same. That's how I see it, as being a faithful adaptation, but really running wide from the storyline, you know, if that makes sense.
In terms of social media, and we talked about spoilers, Shonda, you're very active on Twitter. And I think we talked a little bit about this last year, but I'm wondering how that, for you, makes the creative process bad or good, and how it affects, and the rest of you too, if you're engaged in that world.
It's interesting. I don't think it actually affects it, because by the time the audience is seeing something, we're so far ahead of what they're seeing that they all have opinions, and they're always, I mean, people are like, we're gonna, if this happens, I'm gonna be so mad and I'm never gonna watch the show again. But by then, we're so far ahead and stuff has already happened beyond that, that it doesn't actually affect what we're doing. It's sort of an exercise in torture. Like, I sort of don't know why I would get on there. I was talking to somebody else about this, because if they love something, it is like going on and seeing people's comments. It's like, oh, they're getting it, they love it. But if they hate something, it's a little bit like inviting people who hate you into your house to say mean things to you. Like, I don't quite know what that's about.
How much do you feel the need to defend sort of what you're doing week after week?
Sometimes I get caught up and feel like the need to defend it. Most of the time, I'm just trying to promote the show and sort of get people, like Scandal. I really wanted to get people to watch it. So the entire cast got on Twitter, and so we're all on Twitter and we're tweeting and stuff. But you do find people saying, then there's somebody who's going to make a comment about something else, and so you get caught up defending like this move on Grays or this move on Private, and it's crazy.
When you have 3 shows too, it's a little complicated. How about the rest of you? How engaged have you been in that world?
I try to be completely disengaged. It's so overwhelming. Here's the thing: if somebody says something nice about the show, you go yeah, and then you focus only on the negative stuff. And there's so much negative stuff. I mean, it's astounding. Not just about our shows. I mean, if you any CNN news story, just go down and read the comments, and you can't, astounded how people just vent their spleen about everything, and there's just so much negativity with this stuff that there's really no upside. Because again, I think it's human nature. The compliments roll off your back, and when they say something negative, you go, oh, this guy really, this guy's right. We have no idea what we're doing. It's just like this is like my mother always said. I should get a real job. It's pointless. It's really
Twitter's most useful for talking to the press, frankly. I mean, that's what I use it for the most. Because if I tweet something, reporters will pick it up and put it in a paper. So I don't have to get on the phone, I don't have to do anything. I can clear all kinds of things up by just tweeting it. Right. That sort of helps.
Yeah, I actually am enjoying Twitter right now. I'm sure by the end of the week something will go wrong, but right now I'm enjoying it. It's a little playful. Like, we have very, very rabid fans. They're constantly asking questions, and I think it's a good way to engage them, and the message boards, the comment boards, those seem to be, can be negative. On Twitter, you can just kind of skip and not answer the question or whatever.
No, you didn't get
what's
my
the etiquette,
tweet.
by the way? I'm confused by it all. Like if you between Twitter, Facebook, email, there's too many ways to.
There's too many ways.
Yeah. And are you being rude by not answering? I just don't know what the protocol is.
Well, you can't answer everyone. You can't answer everyone, so you just kind of answer.
Yeah, I've got a flip phone. I've got a flip phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Luddite at heart. I really do. Everyone's mad at me that I don't have a real phone, and yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I'm really slow with technology, and I don't understand what tweeting is.
You also have to be clever too, like in 140 characters. Like Glenn, I actually, for some reason, I got routed. You got routed me, and he's very refined. But you're like one of 2 people I follow, and I really, you're a lot more clever than I am. I'm like, thanks. I'm glad you liked it. I mean,
so what
it's like a thank you now.
This probably isn't the time or place
Right.
when you follow somebody. Does that mean like every time you tweet, I just get an email that says of your tweet? I'm right there with you.
It comes out.
It'll just say Glenn Mazzara says
timeline,
this,
and you just see,
right, and I can respond.
But then everybody sees it. It's like you're talking to one person, we're doing 1,000 people. It's very confusing.
And this email thing you were talking about before, how did that work?
Vina, you made an interesting point about saying that you're not engaged in that kind of stuff. Now, when the finale aired last season and there was the explosion online of people saying, well, how come we didn't know who the killer was, that kind of thing. How did you find out about that?
I heard about it. I mean, through the network and through FTVS.
And what was your initial reaction?
I was surprised initially, and sad because we had planned from the very beginning to make this a 2-season murder mystery. So surprised, but I mean, in a way, it was a blessing not to be tweeting and emailing and all of that, because I didn't actually have to read and hear the negativity in my face.
Was the network, do you think, were they worried about that sort of because I remember Ray described it as backlash. She was very sort of taken aback by how people were sort of coming up to her saying, I can't believe we didn't find out the answer.
I think it was surprising to all of us. I think that it was surprising because, again, we had planned from the very beginning to do 2 seasons.
You weren't surprising anyone with what with the finale? The people that knew sort of where you were headed.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
In terms of your writers' rooms, we were curious if we asked your writers to describe you, what do you think they would say about you as a showrunner, as a writer, as a human, however they see you?
Do they know I'm going to hear this?
They may or may not know.
What would be their biggest complaint?
Biggest complaint? Oh, somebody else go. I got to think.
How about you, Vince?
Mine would probably be that I shoot the airsoft gun in the room over their heads. I have this target across the room, and I practice my. I have one of these pellet guns that I break it out occasionally, and I just
It helps the creative process.
For me, not for them so much. They probably don't care for it that much, but yeah.
How about you, Howard? What would your Homeland writers say?
Well, I think they'd say, and Alex Gonza runs the show, and so it's interesting because he worked for me on 24, and we're old best friends. So it's a very democratic process. I have to say it's a surprise. Not at the end of the day, somebody has to make the choice, but I can be hard sometimes. I'm really hard on myself, frankly, but I can also probably share that, and so I think I have to sort of contain that and I don't know if it's perfectionism, just specificity. I kind of have to run it through my head, and I have to understand it always, and that's not always, particularly, Homeland is a group of showrunners. Everybody has created or run their own shows, and so you have strong people with really good voices, and it's about giving them the room to do their thing, and I hope that's what we do.
And how open are you sort of with feedback in terms of if you have a very clear vision of how a script's going to go, how kind of malleable are you during that?
Well, for instance, Alex and I will come in and we'll say, and we'll say, here's, there have been a couple of mutinies on the staff where they've been said, it doesn't work for us, and Alex and I will retreat with our tails between our legs into the room, and it becomes then the fodder for more discussion. But it really is about knowing when to sort of move forward, when to stop, when to retrench, and really to take in the collective wisdom and experience and talent of people. I do think TV at its finest, unless you're kind of really an auteur, is a collaborative medium with everybody, and it's about staying open and also knowing when to stop and move on.
Yes, you're paying these people because they're all smart, talented writers, and if 5 other people are telling you, we don't think this is working, you'd be crazy not to listen. I'm in that position quite a bit where and occasionally you dig in and just say, no, I'm really confident, and hopefully you're right. But yeah, that's what we're all doing there. It's all. Even in terms of the hierarchy, everybody's in this room because they're writers, and forget who's at what level. It's just leave that stuff at the door, and then nobody should be intimidated to pitch or just feel like you get trumped because somebody has a higher title. And it doesn't even have to be a writer. I've talked to people in the hallway who have a good idea about something, and it ends up on the show. It's it is the democracy of it is really.
I'm a hallway pitcher too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I was like.
Yep.
And Shonda, for you with 3 shows now, how do you make sure that each episode still has sort of your imprint? Because they're all different from each other, but they still do have that same tone.
If you spend enough time in the writer's room, if you spend the time in the writer's room that you should spend, it usually comes through. I feel like I spend some time downloading my brain, and then I have to go someplace else and download my brain there. But what's worked is, on Grey's, I've kept the same writers since basically season 2. So those people know me inside and out. They can say themselves, Shonda's not going to like that, or here's what Shonda would say, or they answer their own questions a lot of the times. And on Private, it's just a matter of, you're still continuing to teach that and hone that skill. But then on Scandal, it was great because I actually said, I'm just going to plop myself down in this writer's room like the old days and just spend all of my time here, and then everybody else can come to me and ask questions about their shows, about the other 2 shows. And it was great to sort of get to just be there. And
did you hire new people, or did you poach from your other staff?
I took some people from different places, and brought them together. It was sort of like this very interesting dream team. And there were only 5 of us. It was great. And we spent tons of time just planning everything out, and we had a blast doing it. And then it was over, we all went back to Grey's Anatomy. But it was great.
Are you all in one complex for all 3 shows?
No, I'm on 3 different lots.
Oh my God. Wow.
I don't know how it happened, but I do know that it requires the studio to pay for a driver for me, so I'm not going to complain about it because it's the single greatest thing that's ever happened. Yeah.
So do you go to 3 shows every day? Or
I sometimes go to 3 shows every day. Sometimes I was trying to do like 2 days here and 2 days there and 1 day here. That didn't work. So I probably hit 2 shows every day.
Wow, that's amazing.
How far apart are the lots? I mean, how much travel time?
Well, none of them are on the other side. None of them are in the valley. They're all on this side. So it's it's Raleigh, Sunset Gower, and Prospect. So it's not so bad.
Gotcha.
And you have a small child. How do you manage that?
2 small kids.
I have 2 small children.
Yeah.
You know what? It's worked. Since the baby, I have a 3-month-old. So since the baby came, I just said I was going to work from home, and everyone had to come to me there. And I got this awesome. They have this awesome editing system where you can edit from home and still see live edits and live editing going on. So I've been doing that. That's been good.
Wow.
Very impressive.
Time management, I guess.
So what do you guys
We just have one show.
Yeah, I'm barely hanging on.
What's your best cure for writer's block?
Just start writing. I mean, assuming you have an outline, I'll write. I'll just type. I mean, typing begets writing, hopefully, and then writing begets good writing eventually. In a perfect world, but yeah, I think just the physical act of just even writing the most basic lines of dialogue and then having a page that sort of resembles a scene from a TV show sparks me to go. And also deadlines. I mean, I love deadlines. I learned early in my career that I wasn't going to do anything until I had a gun to my head, and then suddenly there's no block. It's just it has to be done, and that's what I need.
Yeah.
How about the rest of you?
Yeah, for me it's writing on a legal pad with a pen or a pencil. Wow. Because then you don't feel that anything is committed. You're just messing around, you're just kind of doodling and then writing, and it actually flows. It's shocking how it works.
I've heard that and I've tried it. It didn't work for me.
I do that. Yeah, I've always done that. Yeah.
I can't read my own handwriting, so I write something like, this is pointless.
What's a good thing for writer's block is to just commit to writing the absolute worst scene possible. Get it out of the way. It's ridiculous. You'll end up laughing at yourself, and then then there's no pressure because it can't be that bad. So you'll end up right. You just kind of get it out of the way.
Getting started is the hardest part, and once you get rolling,
but have some fun with it.
What was the toughest scene you had to write this year, Vince?
Toughest scene I had to write. I didn't write that many episodes. I wrote the first one and the last one. And I have 6 excellent writers, and thank goodness for them. But I only wrote 2 episodes.
Do you rewrite your other?
I give notes. In the earlier days of the show, there would be more rewriting, and now I've had a very low attrition rate on the show. We have 2 writers who've been there since day one, after the pilot wrap, since day one of the first season, and the other writers, I don't think we have a writer who hasn't been there at least 2 years. So it's real nice to have that very low attrition rate, low turnover. And they really know the show as well as I do. And they just give notes, but it's great having them. The hardest scene to write was probably the scene where, in the first episode, where Gus cut Victor's throat in the super lab. And it was hard to write for the weirdest self-imposed reason, which is that there was very little dialogue in it, except I knew it needed to play out over a whole act. And this is a dumb reason that was hard, but I knew the director who's going to direct it, who's one of our best go-to directors, has a very quick pace about him, is what we love about him. But I knew this thing had to be able to milk this thing out for a whole act, and yet not let it be boring. So it was like, how am I going to make essentially what could work out as like 4.5 pages of script, play as a 10 or 11 page act, and it's a weird mechanical issue.
A lot of scene direction.
Yeah, a lot of, the whole thing, a lot of scene direction, and then keeping the scene direction interesting, having it read like you would hope, read like a novel or something that someone read for enjoyment instead of just for, okay, where do we put the camera here, what do we do there? So it was hard in a very mechanical sense, but emotionally the show's kind of easy to write. I don't know why for me, just because I'm so tuned into this creep. Walter White, I guess.
He's a lovable creep.
Well, the actor's a lovable actor, but the character gets creepier by the minute, so less lovable, perhaps.
How specific were you? I'm curious in that. Were you in terms of when you I want to see this, I want to see that, or
we try to be as specific as possible. We try to be. We have wonderful directors. There also is very low turnover with the directors. We have a lot who just come back and over again, who know our rhythms and know what we're looking for. But I probably would not be a lot of directors' favorite writer because very specific, very specific, as much as possible. Just the control freak nature of I don't want to speak for any of the folks here, but I know I'm one. So it's just I think that, showrunners tend to, I don't know. You have an image of this world right down to, when your brain is really smoking away. You know what color the china is, what the pattern is, in the scene that you try to picture it all. You try to watch the episode before it ever gets committed to film or HD video or whatever you happen to be shooting on, and therefore you have this feeling of ownership, proprietary feel about it. So you wind up being a control freak. At least I do. I'm speaking for myself.
I became obsessed first season before we started shooting first season after the pilot with the color of the leaves outside of the Seattle Police Department. Wow. Obsessed. And like talking to the production designer, should it be this, should it be that, but what about it matching this? And like everything, it becomes like that obsession with detail that it's a world.
In terms of the detail, Glenn, we were talking earlier about some of the logistical challenges of shooting where you shoot critters and bugs and snakes and such.
Yeah, I mean, we're shooting, an hour south of Atlanta, and our cast and crew are like the Marines taking a beach. I mean, they are just dedicated, and it's 100 degrees and humid, and people are covered with ticks and chiggers, and we had one guy driving a golf cart. He hit a deer last year.
With a golf cart?
The deer. This poor guy broke his ankle, and so then we've got a set now, and just walking around the set, production designer comes in just 2 days ago and said, "Oh, a snake just crawled right in front of him and stuff," and he wanted to know what kind of snake it could be, and and it's just very, very challenging. And we, last year were all exteriors, and very few scenes that maybe we could use for rain cover or something. But it's challenging, but the cast and crew like that. I mean, we have a really good outfit. And I think that adds to the grittiness and the reality of the show.
So how do you? Because it is known to rain in Georgia from time to time. What do you do when you're?
They just shoot in the rain a lot of times, or we will end up. That's why we did last year. We had a farmhouse, and we would have a couple of scenes, but a lot of times they just wait for it to pass. Or if there's lightning, you have to call the shoot or something. So it's a challenge, but I think it actually feels right for our show.
Speaking of challenging moments, during the beginning of this last season, you took over for Frank Darabont. What was that call like from AMC?
It was scary, I mean, Frank had asked me to. I signed on to be Frank's number 2. I went over to the show to work with Frank, and it was scary, I mean, I had. I know what it's like to lose a show that you've created. That happened to me on Crash, so I just felt that it was a painful situation for him, for the cast, for the crew. I know what it's like when a cast that's been selected and gone through a pilot and it gets on the air, and that's very exciting, and then all of a sudden the creator's not there. That's a big challenge to them. And so I just went in and listened to the cast and just said, I'm not going to be the new sheriff in town. We all have to pull together and get through this crisis, and it's. I'm not going to try to be Frank Darabont. That's not fair to Frank. That's not fair to me. And there'll be a script coming down the road that'll be in my voice, and it's going to create a panic. And they all were like, okay. And then we released that script a few weeks later, and it created a big panic. And so I listened to all the notes and just went through and rewrote it. And the fact that I listened, I think, made them feel better. And then the next script was okay, and the next script was okay. And really, I think what got me through and got us all through that was I went back to the writer's room then, which is in LA, and I said, everyone expects us to fail. We have to pull together. And those writers and I just kind of wrote through the night and did draft after draft and found the show that we wanted to do. And we have great producers, Gail Ann Hurd and Robert Kirkman and others, and people just kind of rallied together. So it was kind of a challenge for us, but it was scary. And
Did you see it coming?
I did not see it coming. No, I did not. I was completely surprised by that. You know, so you know, and what was challenging through the process was I started to have a feeling of what I thought the show should be, but it was different from what we had done. Okay, that just as I started writing it as a showrunner, and I just kept saying it feels like this, it feels like that, and then by the end of the finale, people said, "Oh, now we get it," you know. So now I have, you know, at least 7 episodes that I could say, "Oh, that's the show," you know, that I feel I can do.
When the show returned and the ratings were higher than ever and the acclaim was there, did you feel vindicated at some?
No, I was just happy to be out of the woods. You know, I never wanted it, you know, to be a competition between me and Frank. That's not fair. You know, and to clarify the earlier point, you know, I knew we had trouble on the show. We had a problematic season premiere, so I knew we were working on a problem.
Budget-wise or shooting or?
Just the story didn't hang together. The footage came in, it wasn't what we wanted. You know, it was just something that needed reshoots and editing, and it was just a problem. But as far as, you know, the success that the show became, you know, Frank's an immensely talented guy, and I signed on to the show to work with him. So you know, I just think everybody rallied together, and I got lucky, you know, and he wasn't when particular episodes came in, but I don't think that was a reflection on my vision of the show as opposed to Frank's. I don't think that's fair. You know, he's an artist, and hopefully someone considers me one, but it's not necessarily. I never wanted it to be like that. It wasn't. There was no adversity between me and Frank at all. And
has he gotten in touch with you? Has he seen this season?
Well, we traded emails when everything first went down, but you know, he starts shooting a pilot next week, and you know, some of our, you know, like John Bernthal or Jeff DeMunn, who were on our cast, who I'm still in touch with, and a lot of people who work on the show. Some people are going over to work for him, so they, you know, we wish him well, and you know, but I think he has moved on, and I'm happy for him.
He didn't say if he watches it or anything like that?
I don't think he does. I think it's probably painful, you know? I mean, because, you know, and I'm sure all of you know that when you're working this hard on a show and everybody's giving it their all, you become very, very close, and you're working with incredibly talented people, and everybody's challenging everybody, and then to suddenly, you know, be out of that is painful. You know, I know from personal experience. So I'm sure he's done the right thing and focused on his next project, the next work, and he's just like, okay, I'm gonna, you know, make sure the next one's great, and you know, he's doing something for TNT, and I hope it comes together.
Howard, I had a question for you about dealing with shooting a show about the CIA, about the government, and have you gotten any sort of weird notes from anyone who, you know, in the CIA, or people saying you got this wrong? There's no way Claire Danes' character would have gotten through the health, you know, sort of inspection for having this, you know, mental disease and that kind of thing. I'd heard some people saying, "Oh, that could never happen," and I was wondering if you got that kind of feedback.
Yeah, I mean, we have an interesting relationship with the CIA and with the military, and they're by and large surprisingly supportive. I think for the show's kind of essential truth, or there's something about at least the characters, as absurd as it is. I mean, the whole premise, when you think about it, is the CIA operating on U.S. soil, which, as far as we know, isn't something that really happens, and the whole show seems to take place in that environment. So I think our contacts, again, Alex and I gave our CIA, we have somebody who is, you know, who has been a station chief, and she's, it's a she. I met her actually after we created the show. I met her through a completely different circumstance. She became the de facto person that we kind of would vet things through, and she was really supportive after. We thought she'd hate it, and like, you know, but in the meantime, they've rolled out, you know, for our actors, and they've all been given kind of front row seats to some of the way it's done, and she actually provided a storyline, you know,
really?
That we used.
That from her own life?
From her own life, yeah.
Wow.
And have you gotten any other feedback from people who work in that space? And I know.
Well, in the military, like on 24, you know, that was like, you know, we'd call them. We said we need a couple of F-16s by the LA River. Can you get here by 8? And they were like, sure. I mean, it was like great, and it was like amazing because again, for whatever reason, that was perceived by them as pro-military. I think you know here you have a U.S. soldier who's turned, and so my buddy at the Pentagon, I said, hey, how about me? You know, I was like, are you kidding? Like so a little less cooperation from the military, but I do have a lot of friends and people I'm in touch with who are active and retired military, and they are surprisingly supportive about about the show. And our show, we have a guy named Alex Carey, who's actually was a British soldier for 10 years. He ran Lie to Me, and so we have a soldier on staff. And so, and a great writer.
How about the rest of you? What sort of advisors do you have? Vina, for example, do you have police advisors?
We do. We have, unofficially, we've got 2 undercovers from Los Angeles and then an LAPD detective. And then we have a Seattle detective, homicide detective. And then just from years of writing, cold case, I have a Jersey detective who informally
Are they on the writer's room, or they're?
No. We don't have cops in the writer's room.
Okay.
We run stories by them, or ideas, or information, just to make sure we're being accurate.
What's something about the killing that you altered because of that advice?
It was more about basing what characters do on the advice. So like the character holder is based on one of the undercovers that I was doing research before I wrote the pilot. And just everything about his character and how he acts and how he presents himself and how he's always like that, versus turning it on and off. It's more of a character stuff. It's more character stuff. And it's interesting because I've heard on the internet that there's some criticism as far as police procedure on the show, but I hear the opposite when I talk to, our detectives and other detectives and prosecutors. That's how.
Maybe people don't want to believe that it is that slow.
Yes. Maybe, yeah. There's always DNA and it's always solved very quickly.
We have zombies. Yeah. I don't know who. Are you getting notes from meth cookers?
We do hear from partakers.
At 3 a.m.
Bail or something.
Chemists.
We do hear from the occasional partaker of meth and former cook. I assume former. I'm going to assume they are impressed with our mad skills. And one of the coolest moments was we got a lot of great help from the DEA in Los Angeles and in Albuquerque and even in Dallas, Texas. We've got a DEA chemist who actually from the pilot came out. And oversaw the meth cooking, our very first meth cooking sequence in our RV back in the pilot, and said, okay, this step here, what happens here? Well, this is where you defract the blah blah blah. I said, what would it look like? He said, it looks sort of like Strawberry Quick. So I said, go get some Strawberry Quick. We'll put it in. And one of the nicest moments was a season later. A couple of DEA honchos came out, and we're in our meth lab, and we're like, wow, this is like the real thing. This is like, so that made me feel good. You take your pleasures where you can find them.
I always wanted to ask you, did you hear ever from mafia-connected people on Sopranos?
We heard one note that we actually incorporated into the show that trickled down to us that Tony was at a backyard barbecue. And the note came in the next week from somebody, Don would never wear shorts. So if you have next season, Tony had a conversation with Carmine Lupertazzi, and Carmine said, and by the way, somebody told me you were at your house, they saw you wearing shorts, don't do that. So we did work it into the show.
And did you then hear feedback about that?
Well, I guess it was, the message was sent, we heard you loud and clear. Actually, one FBI consultant told me one morning they used to come in and they would, around the water cooler, the FBI agents would talk about the show, and then you see the show last night, and they'd bullshit about it, and then they would listen to their wiretaps from the weekend, and it was the same conversation, but it was all wise guys saying, hey, did you see this Sopranos last night? The same conversation, just on the other side of the...
Cool as that.
That's awesome. Which is great.
I was curious, what is the best or worst advice you were ever given when you were starting out, either as a writer, as a producer? Maybe, and Glenn, you talked about you'd had another career before getting into television.
Yeah, I was a hospital administrator. I managed emergency rooms and ICUs back in New York. I think the best advice I got as a writer was move it up. Like, instead of kind of, you know, building to something and having a slow burn, to always kind of pull up what's working, get to it, and then fill in good story behind it. And that's something that I've tried to do, and it's worked for me.
How about the rest of you? Best or worst advice?
Well, worst advice in general is just you're out of your mind to leave your job as a lawyer and move to Los Angeles. You know, who do you think you are? Are you crazy? And you know, I thank God I was such a terrible lawyer that I really had no choice. I was going to go for this, you know, whether or not it worked. But I think that, you know, the whole idea of just doing what we do for a living is so alien to people. You know, particularly on the East Coast, it's like you don't know anybody in the film business. Like, you know, leave. You know, here at least in Los Angeles, you probably maybe know somebody in the business, but to pack up from a place that has nothing to do with Hollywood and say I'm going to go out there, and you know, everybody expects you to come back with your tail between your legs, and you know.
It's like the best advice is don't do it, and the worst advice is don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's true.
When people ask for advice, that's what I say. If you can do anything else, you know.
There is a
If you could do anything else, if there's anything you want to do, as much as you want to be a writer, go do it.
Right.
Because this is not, that's it.
There was a column I read once in a website about writing, and it's essentially, I think the title is called "Throw in the Towel," and basically what it is just a challenge. Do you think you want to do this for a living? Okay, ask yourself these questions, and it is just bone chilling. Even at this stage of my career, I read that and I still go, "Oh my God!" It was on some website, wordplayer.com. It's a website about writing, and there's a series of columns, just terrific advice. Actually, it's Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, the terrific website. Anyway, one of their columns is about, okay, you say you're an aspiring writer. Well, this is what it takes, and essentially it just lists what it takes in the absolute harshest terms, but it's really real. And essentially it's just, how hard are you working? You think you're good. Do you honestly, can you hold up your work to these things? And even things like, okay, you say you're interested in this business. What is the one iconic image most closely associated with Buster Keaton? Do you know what that is? Well, then you're not really a fan of movies, are you? It's just like one after another. By the end of this, you go, I'm a total fraud. I shouldn't be doing it. And it's like, oh wait, this is what I do for a living. But it's really, I've recommended that to people, and I think the mistake a lot of people make, initially what I'll say is, what you're asking to do is akin to saying, I want to play professional sports. I want to play for the Yankees. That's how few slots there are, and that's how difficult the competition is and how intense it is. And unless you're really willing to commit to at that level, you're probably not going to make it. That's assuming you have talent.
And then you wind up throwing your shoulder out with a pitch. You can only pitch so many fastballs. And that's another thing is, when do you get off stage? I mean, it's like Vegas. You're going to lose. You can have a very long streak, but if you stick around long enough, the house wins. So it's like, at some point,
or even how long are you going to commit to it? And they say, well, if you say I'm going to give it 3 years and then you quit, well, then you weren't really cut out to do it because you quit. But then on the other hand, life is passing you by, and it's really an impossible thing. I mean, I think what it boils down to is either you're a writer or you're not a writer. And if you're a writer, you're going to write, and you will do this. And it's just you don't exactly. Same thing as an actor or any other art. I think you are that thing. And there's a difference between being an actor and a movie star. I think a lot of people want to be movie stars and not. So they say I want to be an actor. You don't know what you're asking for. Because what you're asking for is a really tough life. And for a writer too, the idea to be able to make a living at this is just the greatest gift in the world. To say that this is what I do to pay my bills is just incredible. We're just so blessed.
And if you are a writer, the best advice I've heard is fail doing something, working on something you believe in. In the sense of, a lot of us, when we're between jobs, I speak for myself here, in between TV shows or movies or whatever, what are they selling? What are they buying now? What should I be trying to sell them? Should it be this or that? Is there a certain kind of genre? Is there a certain kind of, and it's just you're chasing your tail. It's just you might as well. The odds are you're going to fail no matter what level you're at. It's like I'm not a big baseball guy, but it's like the guys who get paid the most. Baseball batters, strike out, 2 times for every 1 time they, so if you're going to fail, you might as well go down working on something cockamamie that you actually believe in.
Sure. So.
I have an interesting question that was on the subject of sort of writing. Bernard Malamud said this is like depressing, but like toward the end of his life, he was giving the commencement speech at Columbia, and he said, you know, somebody said, "Do you have any regrets?" And he said, "I wish I could have had 2 lives, one to have written and one to have lived." And it's like, and you kind of get it. And I think it's that like, how do you raise children? How do you be a husband? How do you like live a life when you're perpetually haunted by these stories and responsible for?
That's well put.
And it's really kind of
that's true.
haunting.
And observing half the time.
And yeah.
So what's the answer?
What is the answer?
Well, I think there's a dynamic tension in like carving out those things and actually getting better. I don't think there's any mastery about it. I think you just get older and hopefully wiser, but it's a little bit like being haunted, carrying these stories around your head, and you know.
Yeah, it's a combination of staying in the moment and then incorporating the moment into the work. I mean, it's always I'll zone out at the dinner table, and my wife will see me. I'll be like, so I guess I very subtly nod my head, and she goes, "Where are you?"
Right.
I'm thinking, you know, whatever it is, I'm out thinking of a story. She can always tell, but it's all everything's grist for the mill. I mean, every experience, everything somebody says to you, every little encounter you have with somebody, and it's amazing how many things pop up. I've had friends call me up and go, "Oh my God, I can't believe you put that thing and that happened to us." And I go, "What are you talking about?" That was us 20 years ago. You said this to me, and I have no idea where the thing came from. And then I'll be reminded it's actually something that happened to me 20 years ago, a conversation, an observation, or outright plagiarism from my own life. Hopefully not other people's, but yeah, who knows where it comes from.
Does that ever scare you, though? Speaking of that, I'll come up with something, some bit of dialogue, for instance, and I'll say, "Oh, that's good," and then I'll get neurotic and freak out and say, "I must have heard that in a movie somewhere."
I worry about. I actually did it. Yeah. I actually did it on episode 2 of Boardwalk Empire. I believe it's episode 2. There's an encounter between the Commodore and his maid, where he essentially challenges her about a piece of information. And I hand to God, I did not do this intentionally. Somebody said, some column said that was basically lifted from Remains of the Day. And they had the clip, and it was basically the same dynamic. And I said, you got me. I saw this movie 25 years ago. I swear to God I had no recollection of this. I call it an unconscious homage to Remains of the Day. I don't know what to say. It's absolutely true. I'm not going to deny that that's the same scene, but I also worry about, did I write this line of dialogue before? This exchange.
Yeah,
did I do this on The Sopranos?
You may probably have
and probably, sometimes.
Yeah, I think it all comes back around again. And I do think you're right. Every single thing you see, it all goes in, and then it all comes out. But I've had the experience of, I'll get the private practice script and I'll get the Gray script, and I'll be like, these 2 patients are exactly the same, and oh look, they're both saying the same thing, but the writers don't talk to one another. So I'm the only common link, which means that I went from one writer's room and pitched a story to another writer's room and pitched the same story, but did not realize that I was doing it.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
What do you do in that situation?
Somebody has to, one of them has to go. But sometimes we've already shot. Now I'll be watching something. I'll be watching 2 cuts and going, oh, like they're not saying the same things, they're not the same situation, but the themes are all the same. Because this week I was obsessed with sorrow. So the themes are all the same, and it's a very weird thing.
What were you going to say, Bina?
No, I was just a small aside. The worst is when you realize you're rhyming your lines. Oh my God. I'll be on set and I'll be like, oh my God, this is a couplet.
So read-throughs are great.
Oh,
yeah, you can hear it. Alliteration, rhyming, just plain bad dialogue.
How much do your scripts change while you're filming, if at all, on the film?
Not a lot when we're filming. I mean, a lot of times, sometimes the actors will have questions or they'll feel more comfortable saying something a certain way. But we've put so much time into, crafting the words and crafting the scene and the idea, and they don't change a lot.
How about the rest of you? How much are the scripts for Glenn, for example? When you're out in 100 degrees, are you actually changing?
We have a big rewrite process. So I like to put out early drafts, very sloppy, and then just get everybody's notes and rewrite the thing from page 1, and then rewrite it again and again and again. But once we're shooting, it's been through the process, But I have no problem, really rewriting even the day before a script is going to shoot. But once it starts shooting, I think it's unfair to the director. Once let me say this: once we've toned the script with the director and gone through, everything, if we don't have it together, then it's not going to come together. So once we, you know, meet with the director and everybody agrees what it is, then the actor should learn their lines. We have a couple of actors who have accents, so they have to work a British accent, so they work with dialect coaches. You can't really throw them a curveball at the last minute. That's unfair. So once we start shooting, kind of try to just tweak little lines here or there, but we won't rewrite too much.
What's been your most challenging moment with an actor?
Where's this running?
Well, like, I mean, there was some issues on Grey's in the early years. It was a long time ago, but things like that, challenging moments, or things where changes had to be made.
I remember a time when, and it was not the actress's fault at all. It was a good learning moment for me. It was Gillian Anderson on the X-Files, and I had written this scene where she was about to get an ice pick lobotomy by this crazy guy who had strapped her to a dentist chair. It happens as it happens. And but I wrote in there that she was coming out of some deep anesthetic, and the scene needed to be scary, but the whole scene she was playing it like, oh, why are you doing this? Which made perfect sense for the actress, because I wrote in the damn line that she was deep in anesthetic. And when you watch the footage, it was like, oh, this is just, this is laying here. This is not scary. This is because she's not scared. She's drugged. So I had to ask them to reshoot it. She was very upset with me, which I don't blame her a bit for, and I sent her flowers. But that's not that great a story. But it was she was very sweet, and I learned from that. You got to be careful what you put on the page. So.
How about you, Vina? Any
No, I mean,
moments?
I've been absolutely blessed with a great cast, and especially having someone like Mireille as #1, who's our #1, who's just so grounded and a wonderful woman and super talented, has set a great tone for our show.
I can't say it was easy walking into a trailer and sitting across from Tony Soprano telling him that he has to say the dialogue exactly as written. But it was really great when you realize that Jim Gandolfini is not Tony and you can actually talk to him. But when he's in full makeup in a sleeveless T-shirt saying what, and particularly we were very real sticklers for having the dialogue said verbatim. And when it's down to something like you motherfucking asshole, you asshole motherfucker, you trying to explain why it's better one way and the other way. It's like, really, this is, I have a 2-page monologue and that's what you're gonna focus on. Well, as long as we're doing this, let's really try to get it. So there were some tense days trying to get things done exactly the right way, but not anything that wasn't manageable and nothing that we didn't laugh about at the end of the day, certainly.
You guys are all sort of at the top of your game, but is there something that you haven't done in your lives that you'd like to do, like a post-TV career?
Not a career. I want to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. I want to go from Mexico to Canada. It takes 3 months to do that hike.
That would be cool.
That would be cool.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, that's all I can think about.
I was going to do the Appalachian Trail because I'm from Virginia, back east. That would be, both those would be great.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'd settle for Central Park. Do that. It would be great. Not a career. I mean, I've said this before. I feel like I haven't had a job since I started doing this. So post-career is almost sort of, I wouldn't want to do anything else. I just wish I had more time to read things that weren't related to what I'm working on. All the cliff notes of books I was supposed to have read in college were great, but I just, I see people, on the subway and on the street reading a book, say, wow, what's that like? And I forget, just really have more time.
About once a year, I announce to my sisters that I'm going to get my master's in library science, and I'm very serious about it, because the idea of being a librarian is like the happiest job I can think of. And my sisters laugh at me every single time, and they're like, it's not going to happen, like, let it go. But one day I'm going to, have a library in Vermont somewhere or something. I don't know.
It wasn't that, didn't George Bailey's wife, wasn't that the bad version of her life? She was a librarian.
To me,
that was the worst.
It's the greatest day classes.
That was the worst thing they come up with. She works in the library.
She likes books and wears glasses,
I always would love to have read the original draft. Like, that couldn't have been it, right? And I was like, that's it? That's what you came up with?
Vineyard/library.
Let's go, shh.
Yes. Yeah, let's just say, yeah.
Howard or Glenn, do you have any thoughts on that?
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, because having, you guys apparently did something before this. I came out after college, so I've been doing this for 25, 27, however many years it is. So I actually have fantasized about it, and I've had on my desk a couple of applications to grad school. Schools are very kind. Haven't filled them out, but I've actually done the research and said what it would take. Public diplomacy is one, international relations. I mean, I've always been interested in that and briefly considered a career in the State Department until I saw the entrance exam. So I've just always been interested in foreign policy and not politics, but policy.
You're learning a lot on your show, too.
Well, that's the fun part. I mean, there is a kind of relationship between the two.
And Glenn?
I'd probably want to teach. I have a degree in English Lit, and I was going to be a teacher at one point. And so I could see teaching, English or maybe film, but this idea of the career ending is so scary. Let's move on.
Yeah, what are you trying to tell us?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really